Hello, this is Arne Koets from the Kemenate in Laugreuden, and this time we are putting on some armor on a horse. So the armor for the horse is known as a bard, and the armor I'm already wearing in this image is of course a harness of armor, in this case German armor all round. Around about 1480s is what we're doing here. So the first thing that goes on is the petrol, and here you see that it is hinged into 5 pieces. Yet it is just basically one large section. It is lined in one go, and it has leather straps which will basically make it go on as one. So it just kind of straps around his neck like a big collar, and then we tie it in this case to the saddle. A lot of these are probably, I think all of them are buckled, but the saddle, this medieval Bravante type saddle, had ties for attachment, and they work great. So we just use these at the moment. So ties are very common for many things, even strappy barding. So that would be the straps you normally have on a saddle to kind of go around the chest and croup, and they are actually sometimes tied on rather than buckled on. I'm just checking the girth just in case. I'm riding in armor after all. And then we make sure that the ties are undone so we can make sure that the rest of the armor goes on smoothly. This is the first time we actually put all of the armor on this horse, in the sense of including the full crenette with the mail as well, and all the other pieces. This time we left the taildragon off, that you might have seen in some of the discussions about it, and the pictures that we put up, where there's another piece for the tail of the horse, which is very pretty, but it is a tiny bit later. Perhaps it's a bit of a question of exactly what the dating would be. So I left it off for this one, and you do really see these armors being used without that tail section as well. So going around, we move the horse around a little bit. He's getting a lot more used to it already with all the fitting sessions and all the various parts that he has had on, but now it's actually putting it all on in one go. So we're being a bit ginger about it, the horse is a bit ginger about it, and what you'll see is that he is exploring all of this just as much as I am. So sometimes we're not necessarily as vigorous with exercises, we are just seeing how the horse reacts, because there is specific things that once a horse armor goes out of control, it might come undone or something and is flopping around. That could be a very bad day indeed. So it is very easy to decide that you're going to slap horse armor on a horse and think it's going to be fine. And well, of course you could be lucky, but if it's more locked at judgment, that could indeed be very dangerous to the rider or the horse. So you need to know what you're doing, and you need to be very aware of all the risks that might be involved. And there are many. So if you go about it reasonably with appropriate research, then it's very doable. But it needs to be done properly. The crupper is now being the back of the horse armor is being tied to the saddle as well with redundant straps. We might have been able to make do with fewer, but this was nice and stable. And then they're just buckled across the croup in an X shape. Now, what is interesting is that it's slightly offset at the moment when we do this up. There's a strap that goes under the tail. It is slightly offset at the moment, but once the horse starts moving, it actually centers itself again. And this was something that I was very careful to note, because that is really important. Has it just not shifted yet, or does it shift back into place? And it's with very many things around the horse that's quite important. So the bit and the bridle are based on medieval examples, but we've added a modular extra throat lash. This is often a good idea with chaffrons. Which is the horse helmet, just to make sure that not the whole bridle comes off with the chaffron, in case that could happen. So in this case we have 2 throat lashes, so we can attach that throat latch very high on up on the pole, and that it allows you to have a slightly tighter throat latch that doesn't, however, impede the horse's throat, which is a very medieval thing to do anyway. So then we again have ties on the bridle. We see this in René d'Anjou's Livre de Tournois. In the 15th century, that they have chaffrons tied to the bridle. So we are using that. Now the chevron goes on. This is again one of these things that this horse is quite used to, but you need to make sure you do this right, that you do this quick enough, and that the horse doesn't end up with a piece of metal flopping off his face, because that could go very wrong. So again, we tie it on, and we make sure that we can hold on to the metal if somebody lets go or anything like that. So here we see again that that's tied to the bridle, and then it's strapped around the nose. Now this is important. We also, of course, giving it cookies just to keep it happy, to be honest. But when Max is chewing his cookies, we can also make sure that the straps of the chevron are not too tight. Now with a noseband you often leave quite a bit of leeway just in case, but with these straps you kind of want them to be as tight as possible, but possible being defined by what the horse can still chew with, and that is really important. Hence when he's chewing cookies, you know exactly how tight that would be. Then we have the crenette. Now we decided to do the split pin in the hinge. This is something that I retrofitted to this particular crenette, and the original definitely doesn't have it. And this just makes putting the crenette on a lot easier. The actual original has, and this one has it too, has a pin where the first lame can be detached, but it's quite a bit of a jerky motion. It takes quite a bit of force, and when a horse objects to that, it turned out to be too much of a faff. So we do this with the hinge instead, and this is definitely safer. This is a modern fix to the problem, I must say. But in the end of the day, having the crenette detached from the chevron in itself is very much a historical design element of this particular crenette and chevron. Now we've finally added the male fringes. These are male fringes out of Ukraine, as far as I'm aware. I was supplied these male fringes with the crenette, the original version of the crenette by Roman Terashenko, who did a great job, but he can't be clairvoyant, so there were a few fitting issues. But now I'm on the horse, magicked onto the horse, and I'm trying out various movements on the horse. And again, it starts off a bit boring. I'm just riding sideways on the horse, and what you'll see is that initially I have a bit of trouble bending the horse equally to left and right. And that means that I need to look for how to do that properly, because you can't really feel the reins on the neck so well. So neck reining is not quite as precise. So I'm trying to find out exactly how much leg I can put on, and also with the leg armour that is slightly impeded. So I'm quite careful to touch the horse very gently with the spurs here and there, but without trying to punish the horse with the spurs, but just gently touch. And that's a very big distinction there. It's just with the medieval shoes where the spurs are sitting on, you have a very good feeling of what the spurs are doing, and that allows you to be very careful with them if you need to. So there I'm doing some side movements, mostly travers. Towards the left works really well. Towards the right I was rather still not quite so happy. So I adjusted my reins, which made it a little bit better. But I'm still very much finding my feet, and so is Max, the horse that is. And what you see is that we're trying walk, then we're trying trot, and we're just quite happily moving along. The horse can move its feet and its shoulders, very importantly, and also go sideways. So the armor, of course, does impede a lot of things a little bit. It makes a bit more noise. The horse, of course, is quite used to being ridden in armor and in a medieval saddle, and with a chevron for that matter, and also with the vision restrictions that will give. But all this extra armor, of course, is new for him as well. And this is quite an experienced horse, so he's actually careful to listen to its rider, but building up the intensity of the exercises. And I was asking for that as well. I was wanting to be a bit conservative in a lot of the ways. So yeah, so we ride around a little bit and managed to come down to a halt pretty alright. At the beginning the horse tended a little bit behind the vertical. This is very much something I don't normally want to be doing. and it was just trying to find in which way I could ride him forward and out again, because actually with the bridle it's very difficult to adjust that when you have the armor on. You need to ride it from your seat and from your leg, but I didn't want to overdo his activity in case there was something that we hadn't noticed that was wrong or anything, so I just kind of eased into that a little bit, and then as we go along it gets a bit better. I can let him out and let him stretch a little bit there. At one point he shook his head a little bit. I don't know whether it's on the video, and that is actually quite a little risk, that the horse does a little bit of a shake. And here we see a bit of piaffe. Again, I'm being rather conservative with the amount of energy. The canter transition there is easy peasy, but it was a bit from the forehand really, but he canters quite happily with it. And again, I'm trying not to show too much intention, not put too much impulsion into there. There was a flying lead change that worked relatively easily. We can extend the canter a bit and then collect a little bit as we stop. So just some basic steering and basic things there. So horse is happy eating cookies. So then we just kind of went like, oh right, well that seems to be working all right. So now we'll start a couple of other things that we wanted to try, like working a bit with a lance. So they're handing me up a lance in a moment. And what you can see is that it's quite important that the horse is able to move its shoulders and that the petrel can move up and down a little bit if necessary. But it is relatively deep on his chest in the middle. So you can see from the front here that you wouldn't be able to hit his sternum if you were to attack him, even though the horse is just standing there. So then this is a lance, which is a 16-foot ash lance, which is with a head and everything on the end. And I'm trying to play around with that. And I just plainly forgot to close my visor on this first run. I still have the sword as well, just on my hip. And we just wanted to see how it worked, if we could do some combative maneuvers pretty randomly really, and just kind of have the whole ensemble working. And then you can see the little Knight's Bachelor banner that I attached to the end, just for the sake of the look really. Those lances are so long that they're hard to photograph, I think you'll find. So there, and then I just struck a canter and tried a little bit of a turn. So here I just keep the lance out, and what you might see is that the lance is relatively stable. It will bend a little bit on the arete, but it's quite stiff really. So this is why I noticed that I'd left my visor open, so I close it and make sure that I have it lined up. This is a salad and bever, so not the closed salad that I also have. And then of course I need to tell Elmar to bring me the lance back, yes. And then trying to find out where my hand is. So, and then you can see that the horse is getting a lot quicker at turning and things like that, and is a lot more minded to work. And there I needed to make sure that I had a left lead to do the turn. So when I extended a little bit, switched the lead and had to switch it back before I turned. So, and then we carry on into doing a little bit of canter towards some other movements, just to see if the horse will do it really. So I'm just trying to go up towards some misere under the armor. And here you could really feel that the horse was quite insistent. I want to make sure that I bring my back up, but he didn't necessarily jump quite so high. So there you have it. We were actually trying out our new horse armor, and we were managing to do walk, trot, canter, even some misere and piaffe incidentally, and we were managing to really kind of just do whatever we wanted. So the horse wasn't particularly perturbed by the armor, wasn't really perturbed by the weight, and that means that with this overall load of about 25 kilos of the rider's armor, and about 20 kilos in this case of the horse's armor, that we actually worked out a pretty workable version. And I would imagine that with a bit of practice and a bit of getting used to, we were quite able to function as a 15th century rider in a combative setting quite happily. Of course, it is a bit of faff to put on. It's another thing to get ready in time And of course, getting the horse armor around in a medieval battlefield would have been quite complicated. So probably it wasn't always an option to armor the horses in this way. Putting the armor on the rider was in that sense easy, that they would just ride to battle in their armor anyway. So thereby they were transporting their own kit, whereas the horse armor, it seems to be transported mostly on carriages to save the horses over the long distance. However, if the battle was known in advance that it was going to happen as a prepared advance, then you might be able to equip a unit of riders with a spearhead of these armored riders, where most of the riders might only have a chafron or maybe chafron and creenet, and then a minority would probably have full leather bards. Even smaller minority amongst those might have full steel bards, and they might be the spearhead of 10 riders that makes the hole that the rest files into, perhaps. I'm not sure we'll ever know that for certain, but there is definitely some evidence of such tactics being in use. So that's what this seems to be for, and I think it's working remarkably well. It's a little bit easier than I always assumed, but it definitely does help to be able to place your horse's head where you need it to be, and place all the bits of the horses where you need it to be in order to try this safely, especially when it's actual steel and actual design like it should be. Now, one of the things that is this curious hinge detail that I was talking about at the beginning, it also means that the actual original chafron and creenet, as it currently is displayed, which is a bit faffed around with, probably doesn't allow a lot of pole flexion. So that means that the horse cannot turn its head independently of the rest of its body particularly well from side to side. And this is something that we see more often. So it looks very much like medieval riding assumes that you don't need to turn the horse's head in order to shape your horse or steer your horse. You ride your horse far more from your legs, therefore, and from bending the body of the horse with your legs, your upper legs, your seat, and far less from trying to get a bend from a so-called stellung or pole flexion. This seems to be very much not accommodated by horse armor, and that means that you need to ride basically from your legs and seat, which is actually quite doable, and in a lot of ways actually adds benefits to how the horse moves once you get there. So the horse can actually perform more readily and more suddenly. So I can decide to want to canter pirouette right now. I don't need 2-3 steps of preparation before I can execute it correctly, and that makes life a lot easier. So that means that I have a better steed, really. So that's quite an interesting little detail that we see in some of these horse armors that tell us something about how they rode. So I just thought I'd throw that one in at the end. So anyway, I hope you liked our little experiment of today, and won't bother you for a little while with horse armor yet again, a few days in a row, but we'll hope to make a bit more videos and up the sound and the quality a little bit over the next few weeks and start doing this more regularly. So thank you very much, and from here in Thüringen in Germany, my name is Arne Koets, and I'm wishing you a very good day.